welcome to Robert Review Stuff. And also, welcome to 2018. And while I'm at it, welcome to Jurassic Park. Do 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 do. 73. That's a number of movies that I watched and reviewed in my full list, which you can find a link to in the description below. If there was a movie released in 2017, there's a good chance that I saw and reviewed it. And if not, it probably wasn't worth watching. Or I didn't feel like it. But I did do 73 of them, and then I thought very hard about it and narrowed it down to the 8 worst and 9 best, because that's how this list works. So let's get started. The worst films of 2017. And the runners-up are Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. Don't get me wrong, this was indeed a shit movie. One that felt like it had to have something go bang every 5 minutes lest the audience discover that they didn't write a script. The main reason it's only a runner-up is because I had a pretty good idea of what I was getting into, and it delivered exactly that. Plus, it might be the last one, so yay! American Assassin. Because this movie reminded me of Hitman's Bodyguard, but a boring and humorless version. So basically just watch Hitman's Bodyguard instead. And Justice League. Because though it's probably the second best DCEU movie to date, that's a terribly sad statement to make based on the quality of this film. Also, Ezra Miller doesn't know how to run. And that's his character's main thing. It's like if you cast an actor to play Batman that was afraid of the dark. Number 5. Flatliners. This is a movie about a bunch of doctors who decide to temporarily kill themselves because it gives them special brain powers. Just good science. Of course, this goes sour, and eventually some of them find themselves dead in a much less temporary fashion, which actually greatly diminishes their brain powers. I would have probably been much happier with this movie if it was actually what the trailers led me to believe that it was. That briefly killing themselves made their brains work better somehow, but their brush with death also caused them to see dead people, thus causing horror movie. Instead, their special brain powers had the side effect of seeing manifestations of past guilt. They always write the side effects so small on those labels, don't they? It should be noted that these manifestations of guilt don't just scare you, they can stab you in the hand. And this movie will tell you that it's not enough to just tell someone your sins. They will only go away if you confess your sins in a way that has repercussions. I mean, the only logical outcome to telling another doctor that you accidentally killed someone while you were on duty is the two of you having sex, I guess. But to get the ghost to leave you alone, you're going to have to tell someone in the hospital and get yourself fired. So this could have been a serviceable movie if they went the way the trailers made it seem, but they decided to make this movie instead. As it was, the movie just fell flat. Get it? Because the title. Yeah, you get it. Number 4. The Emoji Movie. This movie wound up lower on my list than I expected through a combination of being better than what's coming in the list and being not as awful as I expected. This is by no means a compliment because this is still a pointless movie based on something I find very annoying and with no redeeming qualities to speak of. But it was better than I expected, and that simply must count for something. Now, I am not someone who particularly enjoys emojis in the first place, because I once learned how to express myself with words. Typically, I will only resort to them long enough to send a picture of an eggplant to Josh. He knows what it means. But in general, emojis are harmless. Or at least they were until some genius got the idea in his head that they could be expanded into a feature-length movie. Symbols lazy people use. The story pretty much writes itself, and the story very well may have written itself. I can't imagine a person writing it and thinking it was a good idea. Or at least not someone over the age of 10, because their favorite joke in the movie is saying poop in different ways while a poop emoji walks around. Whatever computer glitch wrote this script felt like it wanted to make the next Wreck-It Ralph or Inside Out, but lacked anything that made either of those movies special. They just wanted to poke fun at the emoji-using, phone-obsessed youth while also not existing without those people that they attempted to mock. But by far the saddest thing about this movie is how many people that I enjoy and respect were unable to make this movie anything worth existing. Number 3. Amityville: The Awakening. A common gripe that I've had with horror movies in the past is that they always get me wondering how the people in the movies don't at least have a general idea of how to react to the situation that they're in. How do you see a zombie and not know what it is, and then decide that it's a good idea to put your arm in front of its face? Have you not seen movies? You must then assume that the idea of zombies does not exist in this reality, and that the characters have not seen anything like it before. And then you get to a movie like Amityville: The Awakening. You start to wonder how these people don't know that this house is bad news based on the 30 other Amityville movies. But then you start correcting your interpretation of this movie's reality, and then they mention the other Amityville movies. And then they watch one of the other Amityville movies in this movie. But then the main character has somehow never heard of them and doesn't know that she's in a haunted house. And also apparently doesn't think to Google the place she's moving to beforehand, because I guarantee you that's going to be one of the top search options. Of course, this is a girl that spouts solid logic about her comatose brother like, he's my twin. I can feel that he's gone. Science. This girl is also blamed for the current status of her veggie brother because he was injured trying to defend her honor against a boy that spread naughty pictures of her around their school. Personally, I say that is his duty as a brother and also his fault for not being better in a fight. Bella Thorne's hands are clean in this. Her response to this blame is to go goth, but only on the surface. Underneath, she's wearing the traditional goth lacy pink panties and feels most comfortable doing her homework and walking around her house completely pantsless. Not complaining about that, by the way. That might have been the one good part of this movie. But really, her stupidity is not her fault. It's shitty parenting's fault. Her mom is a real shitbag and pretty openly blames her for her brother's condition and is the one that moved their family into a haunted house. The veggie brother is the only person in this family and in this movie that the mother likes, and she's shitty to everyone else. In summation, this movie is not scary, mostly boring, and most of the characters are unlikable and not particularly well performed, and it barely bothers to try. As they say in this movie, remakes totally blow. Number 2, Bye Bye Man. If you were only interested in one or two dicks, this is not the movie for you. This movie is a whole bag of dicks, and only supplies in bulk. Bye Bye Man is the tale of a supernatural creature called the Bye Bye Man, who makes people kill other people by having them hallucinate things that would drive them to such an action. This can happen any time that you think about him, and you can pass this curse on to others by telling them his name. And possibly on accident by just saying goodbye to one of your bros. So what do the people in this movie do? They investigate him to try to find a way out of this curse, but also guaranteeing that they never stop thinking about him. Then they type his name into the worst search engine in history that somehow brings up 0 results for the phrase Bye Bye Man. Look, I get that you're trying to say there are 0 search results because people are trying to hide his existence to avoid passing on the curse. But I just checked, and that phrase brings up 50,700,000 results. Because some people that don't even know about this curse might just be saying goodbye to people that are male. Also, in another attempt to distract his brain from thinking about the Bye Bye Man, the main character drives to another investigation location while playing the song Bye Bye Love, which is just genius. So basically what I'm saying is that this movie is really dumb and doesn't make much sense at all. Also, the acting was notably lackluster, the effects were pretty awful, and of course, the greatest sin a horror movie can commit, it wasn't remotely scary. If you come across this movie as a viewing option, I just hope that you'll be able to find some way to just say adios to it. Number 1, the worst film of 2017, 50 Shades Darker. Strangely enough, I felt like 50 Shades Darker was actually better than 50 Shades of Grey. So you may ask, why is it still number 1 on my shit list? Well, it was still awful. You don't get that many points for being better than your garbage predecessor. The first one was so bad, I was almost scared to start watching this one. My list be damned, I can't take another one. Eventually, I was able to talk myself into it, and boy was I glad I did, because good movies feel so much better in comparison. Here's the one solitary nice thing I'll have to say about this movie. It is slightly better written than the first one. Slightly. There are still moments where Anna touches Christian's beard and says things like, "This is spiky," which is a thing that humans say. And then there are moments where Anna asks Christian to tell her all about his past, and he says that his mother was an addict and died when he was 4, and that Anna can fill in the blanks from there. The 30 to 40 years of blanks. And then there are moments like where Christian takes Anna to a party to meet his mom, which is sweet. And also, since we're going to meet moms, why don't you cram these steel balls in your vagina? And then later he says, "And now you know what the silver balls do." You put them in your vagina, you should have figured out their purpose at least roughly around the point of insertion. So what I'm trying to say is that the characters in this movie are either poorly written or written intentionally as morons. Mostly Anna, who is so proud that she tears up a $24,000 check because she doesn't want to take Christian's charity. Really? Hell, I'd probably let this guy do a little rough trade on me for $24,000. He ain't bad looking. But not Anna. She's proud. And she's totally against his S&M stuff now. Then she starts requesting it on the second date. And she doesn't want to be just another one of his submissives either. But then she submits to him pretty quickly. But she definitely doesn't want to be like that other submissive that breaks into her apartment, fires off a gun, and then points it at her. And then after that, she says that she's more scared of Christian, who's able to defuse the situation using his dominant powers over his former submissive. More scared of him than the lady that was just pointing a gun at you. and probably intended to use it. Also poorly written was her boss, who was definitely written by someone who just went through a sexual harassment seminar and just wrote the exact opposite of everything they heard. Even people that are prone to sexually harass someone tell this dude to chill. He is way too blatant with it. So obviously he gets fired, and then his bosses say, we need someone to take over for him. How about a secretary? And so Anna gets promoted. Okay, I'm sick of talking about this movie. Let's move on. The best films of 2017. And the runners-up are... You know what? I'm not telling you what they are yet. I'll tell you what they are after the list, because all 4 runners-up are comic book movies left off the list so that it wasn't possibly all comic book movies. And I don't want to spoil through process of elimination which one actually made the list. So instead, let's move to number 5, Coco. Before I get to my thoughts on Coco, I have a short 37-minute dissertation about Olaf's Frozen Adventure to read you, so if you'll bear with me for a second here. Kidding, of course. That would be a really annoying way to start something, wouldn't it? When it comes to this movie, I was surprised to find that I didn't actually have any interest in watching it. Typically, Disney Pixar movies pique my interest right away, but nothing about this movie intrigued me. Then a friend of mine told me he wanted to go see it, and let's face it, I don't do anything particularly important with my free time and had no excuse not to go. And it turned out pretty well in the end. It certainly didn't turn out well in the beginning because of the 7-hour Frozen movie I had to sit through. Not that it was terrible or anything, but it was way too long and got Coco started on the wrong foot because I already felt more than a little bored by the time the actual movie started. But eventually, I warmed up to Coco and found it to be very good. It was a very pleasant story, though it might have been lost on me at times due to my overwhelming whiteness. Thankfully, I watched this movie with a Mexican friend of mine, so I could turn to him every 5 minutes with questions like, "What's an abuela?" Speaking of which, another big winning point in this movie is the ending, which had me crying like a bitch. And then after that ending, another big winning point is that I get to tell all my Mexican friends that I understand their plight now because I've seen this movie. But Coco was a solid movie throughout with a wonderfully touching ending. I just imagine it'll be even better on DVD where I can actually choose if I want to watch the Frozen short first. Number 4, Baby Driver. It's not often that I find myself appreciating the process of making a film more than the film itself. I'm a simple man, and when I watch a movie, I tend to invest myself in the story of the movie and don't really pay much mind to what they might be saying with the way they filmed the movie. But Baby Driver was different. I found myself so impressed with the filming process from start to finish that I didn't really appreciate the movie itself until the second viewing. And I mean literally from the start, because I was so impressed with the direction and choreography of the first car chase and even the opening credits that I didn't mind the fact that I might have been missing an interesting bank robbery by watching a guy sing a song to himself in his car. Nor did I mind the fact that technically the opening credits was just watching a guy go get coffee as words to a song he was listening to popped up on the wall behind him as graffiti. I don't know how everyone else might look at a task like this, but as someone who does a bit of editing himself, the idea of trying to direct and edit a movie to have it perfectly match up to the lyrics and beat of a song terrifies me. If you were to watch this movie on mute with subtitles, you might not think it was anything special. Without the music, it would just be a somewhat basic love story and heist movie, but with some phenomenal actors and spectacular performances. I did find myself wondering why so many people that rode with Baby in this movie had such a distrust for him because he listened to music. I mean, you've seen what he can do, even while being distracted by music, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. On the other hand, it is really dumb for someone involved in crime as much as Baby is to decide he likes to record his conversations, even if he does so innocently to make music with. Since it fits with his character, it makes sense from a writing standpoint. Super dumb from the character standpoint, though. But Baby Driver is a solid movie that sets itself above other movies by being so damned impressive as a piece of filmmaking. Definitely check this one out. Number 3, The Disaster Artist. Do you want to know how good I thought The Disaster Artist was? If the answer is no, what the hell are you doing here? That's the entire point of this video, and how have you lasted this long? For the yes crowd, this movie is so good that it actually inspired me to read a book. And I hate reading books. Okay, technically I didn't read this book, but I did pay to listen to it on Audible. Okay, and technically I didn't pay to listen to it on Audible because I used audibletrial.com/atomicgeekdom to get it for free. What I'm trying to say is that this movie inspired me to get the contents of the book The Disaster Artist into my head. And that's my point, okay? But this movie is so wonderful and hilarious and unique. Much like The Room itself, the making of which is this movie's subject matter. But unlike The Room, this movie seemed to do those things intentionally. James Franco does a perfect job becoming Tommy Wiseau, and his brother Dave does a really great job at becoming Greg Sestero, though admittedly he looks nothing like him and his beard felt pretty unconvincing. And every other character supports and delivers on all the comedy and even the surprising occasional emotional moments. And that supporting cast is crazy impressive in who they were able to get involved in this movie. I would say that you should go check on IMDb to see who they were, but why waste time? You know that I'm just going to say watch this movie, so just go do that instead. The one caveat I must mention about this movie is I'm not sure how someone would react to this movie without having seen The Room first. I had already seen The Room, or at least a version of it as mocked by the fantastic people at Riff Tracks, and once you see The Room, it changes you. I feel like I can no longer relate to the brain functions of someone whose brain has not been permanently altered by watching that movie. My assumption is that everyone will love this movie, but the people who have seen The Room will love it that much more. Number 2, The Big Sick. I've been a very big fan of Kumail Nanjiani and Emily V. Gordon for many years from their various podcasts and podcast appearances. And I've heard them tell the story of how they met and fell in love many times by the time I heard that they were turning that story into a movie. So I was very excited to see this movie, though apparently I wasn't excited enough to actually remember to go see it while it was still in theaters. I was, however, excited enough to buy it when it released on Blu-ray sight unseen. And when I finally watched the movie, I was expecting that I would enjoy it, but was thinking that my enjoyment might be possibly diminished by the fact that I already basically knew how it turned out. I was very wrong. And stupid, I guess. I mean, you could typically expect a happy ending at the end of most movies, so why would knowing that this one has a happy ending hinder it? But even knowing how this movie turns out, I was invested every step of the way, even to the point where I was super nervous at the end of the movie to see how it would wrap up. I already know how it wraps up. I'm watching the movie that they wrote together as a married couple. That's how good this movie is. And even though it wrapped up as I expected and roughly how it happened in real life, I did not expect that I'd be spending almost the entire third act of the movie with tears in my eyes. Kumail killed it with this movie, both in his acting and in the writing of the movie, which was equal parts emotionally riveting and hilarious. And Zoe Kazan as the stand-in for Nanjiani's real wife, Emily, will make you fall in love with her even faster than Kumail did with the real thing. Emily's parents, played by Holly Hunter and Ray Romano, and Kumail's parents, whose names I will not attempt to butcher here, as well as every other person involved in this movie on every level, deserve all the props in the world. This movie is wonderful, and I straight up demand you find a way to watch it as soon as possible. So, here we are. A comic book movie has not yet been mentioned, but we all know there will be one. And of so many quality candidates, which movie did I pick as the best comic book movie, nay, the best overall movie of 2017? The answer to that question is number 1, the best film of 2017, Logan. Of course it's Logan. It had to be Logan. Logan is such a good comic book movie that it's even amazing just as a movie in general. You don't typically expect this kind of emotional reaction out of a comic book movie, but this movie earns it. And I wouldn't even say that I had terribly high hopes for this movie initially. I mean, though Hugh Jackman has always been great in the part, Wolverine has been in some bad movies. X-Men Origins Wolverine would definitely be in the running for one of the worst comic book movies ever. Thankfully, Jackman and Patrick Stewart made damn sure that their last outings as Wolverine and Professor X were worth it. And this movie lets you know right away that this is not your daddy's Wolverine movie. He's older, he's weaker, his claws and his powers don't work correctly, but he will still stab your face right off. It has been a sticking point with me in the past that lazy writing often leads these movies to strip away the powers from their main character to give them something to overcome. This of course ignores the fact that those powers are one of the main things we like about him, and boy do they love taking away Wolverine's adamantium and healing factor. In this movie, they do weaken Wolverine Professor X, but it's more from the inevitable effects of aging, and in Wolverine's case, being poisoned by the thing that once made him nearly unstoppable. Plus, technically, even at this age, they're almost as dangerous as they ever were. And this movie does do us the solid of giving us at least one full health, violent, unbridled badassery scene from Wolverine before we lose Jackman forever. And by the way, if we do lose Jackman, I hope that they substitute him with this little girl, even if the timelines don't make sense. Just say time travel or some bullshit. You've done it before, and this little girl is too good and too awesome to just disappear because that timeline is over now. This movie may very well be the greatest comic book movie of all time. Great story, tons of callbacks for people that have been fans and have seen every movie, amazing performances, and a real emotional resonance. I don't yet know how many times I'll have to see this movie before I can watch the final scene between Laura and Logan without bawling my eyes out, but I can confirm as of 2 days ago, I'm not there yet. So here are the 4 runner-up comic book movies, all deserving of a spot in the top 5, but Logan came out. Spider-Man Homecoming, I don't really have a good reason that this wasn't number one. It's certainly number one in the Spider-Man movies, and a fantastic movie with great actors. I don't know, let's just say it's because they tried to say that Zendaya was MJ and blame that for it not being number one. Thor Ragnarok. This movie is at least a contender for the funniest Marvel movie to date, though that distinction probably goes to Deadpool. The only thing that might have held this movie back from the number one slot is that Thor was uncharacteristically funnier than any version of Thor we had seen up to this point. It certainly wasn't unwelcome, though. Wonder Woman. Because it is by far the best DCEU movie, and the first 2/3 of the movie are perfect. But unfortunately, there was more movie after that, and the movie didn't finish strong enough to overtake Logan, though the ending wasn't nearly disappointing enough to stop me from calling the movie awesome in general. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Really wonderful movie, funny and emotional where it needed to be. The only thing I can think of that might have held this movie back is that it didn't benefit from the same surprise about its quality that the first one did, because we all went into this movie expecting the level of great that we received. Also, Mary Poppins, y'all. So, those are my favorite and least favorite movies of 2017. Whether you agreed or disagreed, I hope that you enjoyed. I also hope that you'll grace me with your personal picks in the comments below. And while you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe. And so for this week and last year, I have been Robert, and the films of 2017 have just been reviewed.
Allegiant. I don't know why I watched Allegiant. I also don't know why I watched Divergent. And more than that, I don't know why I watched this one when I apparently forgot to watch Insurgent, which I guess is the second one. So maybe fans of the series would argue that I didn't like this one because I wasn't able to follow the deep and cohesive storyline. Also a possibility, because it was boring and dumb.